On with Eric Bolling. We want to take a step out of the House Oversight Committee hearing for just a moment. Eric Bolling and I do want to talk to Congressman Darrell, California, joining us now by phone. Of course, he is the ranking Republican on this committee. He was kind enough to step out of the hearing room to talk to us right now. Congressman, it's Cheryl Casoni. Just real quick here, what are your thoughts so far on what you've heard from Ben Bernanke?
Well, Cheryl, on a bipartisan basis, we're seeing that there's some differences that cannot be reconciled. Chairman Bernanke is outright saying that he did not in any way, shape, or form threaten or express or try to convey a threat, and yet you have Paulson, who will be Secretary Paulson, will be with us in 2 weeks, who is on the record, under oath, saying that, in fact, he was told to convey a threat. You certainly have Ken Lewis, who 2 weeks ago said he felt threatened and he conveyed specific language. And then you have Chairman Bernanke on several occasions not remembering what we have emails of some of his key lieutenants saying happened. And it's becoming more clear that Chairman Bernanke doesn't really understand the level of power he seems to have, in that his every wish turns into demands by others, and he may not remember these things, but they led to results of real threats being issued. Well,
Congressman, you're talking about Arthur Angulo from the Fed, and basically your point in these emails, and we've read through the emails here at Fox Business, they've been published, is that basically this was a cover-up. You have been quoted as saying this was a deliberate cover-up. You're saying that Mr. Bernanke, in your opinion, has evaded that question?
Well, he has evaded the question, and when he talks about keeping groups informed, and yet emails show us that the OCC and the SEC were not at the table, and deliberately not at the table, and particularly when they start looking at not having reportable events, including telling people orally but refusing to put in writing the fact that they were going to provide aid to cover this hole that was created by the growing losses at Merrill Lynch. It's very clear that they deliberately gave assurances they would do it, but refused to put it in writing when Ken Lewis was trying to be able to go back to his board and say, I have these assurances, therefore we should go forward with the deal.
Representative, one of the most telling, at least for me, the most telling part of the testimony so far is when, and I can't remember who the representative who was asking the question, but he asked Bernanke, Paulson has stated that it was on your command that he recommend the Bank of America, or at least Ken Lewis, may be removed if they use the MAC clause, the Material Adverse Change clause, in the Bank of America Merrill deal. And then Bernanke said point blank, I think he recanted that story or changed or retracted that statement. Has he, in fact, changed that statement and in any form? Because I haven't heard of it.
Not at all, and we don't expect him in 2 weeks to do that. What Chairman Bernanke is relying on is sort of a secondary clause that he never really threatened to remove him or expressed that he should be threatened to be removed, except if, because of his invoking the MAC, and then he needed assistance, we would essentially have lost confidence in the board and therefore could not provide the assistance unless the board was removed. That's sort of the sequence of events that makes the threat a little more nuanced. But you understand, there was already $15 billion in preferred stock. Chairman Bernanke already was effectively representing the stockholders, being the people of America. He already had the ability to fire Ken Lewis if he wanted to, the same as Wagner was fired and others have been fired. We the people, had already bought our way into having that kind of control, and that's part of the problem, is that saying that if you don't do this, then there will be confidence loss, therefore this will happen. That's more than a veiled threat in our estimation, and one that Bernanke should simply say, I thought the end justified the means. I thought I was acting in good faith. Can we move on? He's not willing to do it. I don't think he's going to be willing to do it. And when Paulson comes in 2 weeks, and perhaps others, I think what we're going to see is what some people would call a contradiction, others would call a lie, some people would call a failure to report, others would call a cover-up. But no matter what, those definitions, once you get past the subtlety of those definitions, these are real events that should not have happened.
Well, Congressman, let me ask you then, what is the outcome here? I mean, you're going to Mr. Paulson in a couple of weeks, as you stated. Ben Bernanke, it looks like, is not going to say in any way, shape, or form that he ever threatened Ken Lewis. That's pretty clear at this point in the day and through this hearing. So where does this go from here? If you don't get the answers you want out of former Treasury Secretary Paulson, what is the next step for you in the committee besides this never happens again?
Well, we're the Committee of Oversight and Reform. Once we shed light on something, we start asking the questions of how do we keep it from happening again. In this case, the first order of business is going to be to question whether or not, behind closed doors, without parties that have a vested interest, like the SEC and the currency, being fully informed. I mean, literally fully informed, not just informed when they absolutely have to. Then we're going to have to question how the Fed can get additional jurisdiction, particularly one that would allow them to pick a non-financial entity, call them a systemic risk, and do whatever they need to do, including a shotgun wedding, to save the economy. These powers that are being proposed beg the question of, do we need oversight, more oversight as things are, and how are we going to get more oversight if these new powers are given?
Representative, I remember this. It was a September weekend, September 15th, and I remember the shotgun wedding between the two. I know.
I guess we shouldn't call it a wedding. It didn't have the appropriate gowns. It was just a marriage done behind closed doors.
Call it what you will, but you know, the one name that hasn't really surfaced all day today was Tim Geithner, and I'm pretty sure he was involved in some of this negotiation early on, that original weekend. And some of the emails that we have are from the New York Fed's office as well. So where is Geithner on this? Has anyone really had a discussion with Geithner on what he knows?
Well, I think Secretary Geithner is going to have a role to play at some point. I want to be very careful to make one thing clear. Chairman Towns and I are working on a bipartisan basis. Sometimes that requires that you be very careful about bringing in this case, the current who has the confidence of the president, unless absolutely necessary. We don't want this to unnecessarily move toward one party or the other. And we've tried to follow exactly where things lead and stay away from that because, as you can imagine, it's fairly easy for things to be shut down if it looks like somebody's ox is going to be gored here in Washington on one side of the aisle or the other. Ed Towns and I have established a relationship where we're trying to create the transparency, we're trying to do the oversight and then supervise good reforms, and sometimes that does mean that if we talk to Secretary Geithner, it's probably going to be last and only if absolutely necessary.
Congressman Issa, thank you very much for stepping out of the hearing and for the quick phone call. I know you need to get back. We're going to let you go.
Thank you,
Congressman.